Namo Narayana. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om. Shiva Hum. Om. Welcome to another satsang with your host, Chuck the Yogi from the Yogi Cave. As it gets colder and colder, as we head towards the darker and darker and darkest part of the year, we shall continue with the Yoga Sutra. Where was I? Let's take a look. Way over here. Yeah, I think it was 3.6. Tasya Bhumishu Viniyogaha. Its progression is gradual. So what Patanjali is saying is, unless you're very talented or you've acquired great merit from previous lives, this process of achieving samadhi is a gradual process. It's kind of like the alchemical notion of going through these series of processes, alchemical processes, to turn dirt into gold, to turn base elements into gold. It's the very same thing. So Patanjali is saying this doesn't happen overnight. This can take lifetimes. And I'm a witness to that because I started this way back in the 80s, mid-80s. And I only feel like lifetimes later to me, like I've really come full circle or full spiral when it comes to yoga. And so that's why at this point I'm giving it out to the world, because I feel like finally I'm in a position to do that. Anyway, 3.7, Trayam Antar Angam Purvebhyaha. In relation to the previous 5 techniques of yoga, the 3 components of constraint are inner members. So, restraint, observance, posture, breath control, and sense withdrawal are the outer members, or anga, because Patanjali's yoga is Ashtanga, or the 8th limb yoga, right? So, again, yoga has outer limbs and inner limbs. The 5 outer limbs are restraint, observance, posture, breath control, and sense withdrawal. And the inner ones are concentration, meditative absorption, and ecstasy. So again, concentration, meditative absorption, and ecstasy are the inner members, the inner sanctum of the temple. And all those other ones are the outer court of the temple that lead to the inner court, to the inner sanctum. But just as in temples in ancient times, you have to have the right credentials to get in the inner sanctum. Not anybody, not Joe Blow, not Jane Blow could get to go into the inner sanctum of the temple, whether it's a temple in Jerusalem, temple Holy of Holies, in an Egyptian temple. It was the same principle. So this is what Patanjali is kind of alluding to, and same goes to some extent in Hindu temples, or parts of the Hindu temple that are inaccessible. In certain Hindu temples, not all of them, but the principle applies to Hindu architecture, Indian architecture, as much as to ancient temple structures or temple architecture from Greece, Rome, Egypt, Jerusalem, you name it. Anyway, 3.8, Tarapi Bahir Angam Nirbijasya. Yet they are outer members in relation to the seedless ecstasy. So again, going back to ecstasy with seed and ecstasy without seed. And ecstasy with seed, or samadhi with seed, is what could be used, the Sanskrit term that could be used is savikalpa samadhi. And that is a samadhi that requires props in order for that samadhi to be sustained. That prop can be a geometric pattern, that prop can be a mantra, that prop can be an image, that prop can be a posture, that prop can be a breath technique. It doesn't matter, right? So this is the purpose for the props. But the ultimate purpose of those props are just training wheels. Eventually you have to let go of them, right? And this is one of the greatest challenges that Ramakrishna had in letting go of the image of Kali. And his guru helped him to achieve the seedless ecstasy. The ecstasy or samadhi without props, which is in Sanskrit could be termed nirvikalpa samadhi, right? So that's when the savikalpa samadhi is the idea of walking up the steps, and the nirvikalpa samadhi is when you jump off into the abyss, right? So these are just metaphors, but they allude to something. 3.9 Vyuthana Nirodha Samskarayo Abhibhava Pradur Bhava Nirodha Kshana Chitta Anvayo Nirodha Parinamaha. When there is subjugation of the subliminal activators of emergence and the manifestation of the subliminal activators of restriction, this is the restriction transformation, which is connected with consciousness in its moment of restriction. Very technical, right? But the idea is that, say for example, you have an addiction to porn or something like that, or an addiction to a substance or whatever. So what do you do in order to achieve the opposite? You apply opposite behaviors or thoughts, right, in order to neutralize the impulses that you might have that compel you to engage in a repetitive, self-soothing behavior that we call addiction, right? So the idea is that in order to achieve samadhi, you have to be able to take these waves of consciousness and you have to apply a counter wave, right, to neutralize that initial wave of consciousness. Now, this creates a playing field that is quiescent, where there are no waves, right, which is what the Buddha would call nirvana, or cessation, right? Cessation of what? Cessation of the waves of consciousness. So Patanjali, in his very technical way, is saying that in order to achieve this samadhi, there has to be behaviors, thoughts, actions, techniques that allow the yogi to neutralize these other waves of consciousness that are getting in the way of samadhi, right? So that is the essence of that mouthful. Let me see if I can do one more. 3.12. This is a very technical pada, if you haven't noticed. Tataha punaha shanta unitao tulya pratyaya chitasya ekagrata parinamaha. Then again, when the quiescent and the uprisen presented ideas are similar, this is one-pointedness, transformation of consciousness. So the purpose of the previous applications of these techniques or what have you, in order to create that quiescence, that samarasa, that level playing field of consciousness, is precisely to achieve ekagrata, or one-pointedness, right? To take consciousness and to filter it and to channel it, right? It's like taking this raging sea and funneling it into a ditch of some kind, a river, and narrowly projecting that consciousness in the direction of one-pointedness, So, one pointedness is that stepping stone that leads you, that threshold of the inner sanctum that leads you to the Holy of Holies, which is, in this case, Samadhi, right? So, anyway, those are a couple of mouthfuls right there. And I'm going to leave it there because 2 mouthfuls is already too much for one sitting. I don't want to give anybody any brain aneurysms or anything like that, so we'll settle for 2 mouthfuls for now. Om Namo Narayana, Om Namah Shivaya, Shiva Om, Shiva Hom, Jai Ma, Jai Mahakal. Till next time.